Okay, I can see we've got a few people joining in. I will start with the intros and setups now, and we'll make sure we try and finish up. We've got an hour set aside of this, but hopefully Rich and I are not going to use all that time. But thank you all so much for joining us today. This is the second in a series of 2 webinars. It doesn't mean that everybody needed to dial into the first one. We're covering slightly different topics and content here. And obviously, if you enjoy this one so much, you can go back and listen to the other one and find it on our website. But we're here to discuss all things AI search today. So to get us started off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Claire Wilson. I'm head of content and strategy here at Stratton Craig, and I've been here for 9 years now, and work with all kinds of clients to really help direct them in terms of their communication strategy, all kind of language and brand strategy as well in terms of tone of voice development, thought leadership content, etc. And I'm joined by my colleague Richard, and I'll hand over to Richard to introduce himself.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm Richard. I'm Chief Digital Officer, and basically I look after all of the digital communication solutions that we support our clients with, from websites and creative reporting and so on. And really, as you can tell from the topic of this webinar, helping them address the AI challenge. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Richard. So in today's session, we're going to cover off a little bit about how AI search works, not in too much detail, technical detail, in case anyone's concerned they're in the wrong webinar. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of avoiding generic content. It's one of the conundrums of AI. The slop that it creates is not the slop that it surfaces. We're going to talk about how to write content that gets cited, and then we're going to have a look at measuring your performance in AI search with the AI analyzer. So to get us started off, for those of you who are not as familiar with Stratton Craig, I'll just briefly run over this. We're a corporate communications and content agency, and we work with all kinds of clients to help them communicate really complex messages to broad audiences. It's a bit of a sweet spot for us. And that's basically figuring out what matters for a range of different audiences and helping translate that complexity in a way that's going to land. We've been in the biz since 1987, so as you can imagine, the kinds of writing we do have changed a lot over that time, but what hasn't changed is our belief that you don't have to dumb something down to make it better understood. So we focus on clarity within even the most complex messages, and we think that can be really transformative. We do all kinds of work, broadly split across 4 categories. So those split on the side there on the right hand side. And we have a fantastic team of in-house writers with real specialisms in areas like sustainability, tech, finance, content strategy. But we also tap into a wide network of trusted freelancers where we need specialist sectoral format knowledge, because we know the person who's going to write your annual report is not going to be the person writing a sexy social post for you. Richard, would you like to tell us a little bit about Black Sun?
Yeah, we help our clients really better communicate and engage with their stakeholders through their digital channels. And our main area is around corporate reporting, sustainability, and of course digital. And you can see on the right hand side there, we provide an end-to-end suite of digital services and solutions. So really helping our clients drive more effective communications through digital. Okay.
Thank you. And it should also be mentioned that we are both part of the Positive Change Group. And so that focus on building trust with a range of different stakeholders is something that we both share really passionately. So in terms of setting the scene, I'm going to hand over to you, Richard, to take the lead on this part.
Yes, thank you. So I guess the first thing that we thought we'd cover off is how AI actually works. So as you can see from this slide, just in summary version, then I'll cover a bit more of the technical detail. Clearly, what you'll know is that there's basically a 4-stage process, which is really the search engine. So say ChatGPT, when you enter a query, it'll work out as best it can what your real intent is behind the question. It'll then assess and gather the content to draw in the multiple sources that it sees. It will then synthesize based on authority and also the content that is easily clickable, snippable, and so on, and then generate the response for you. And in a little bit more detail, as you can see from this slide, as a first stage, what you'll notice if you do have this wonderful data typically from your firewalls and so on, is that there's a continual process of LLMs hoovering up content across the web, and it's using that to inform its own internal data, so it's known as training data. So when you enter a query, it'll look at its training data, see if it's got readily available response, particularly for time-based content, such as, I don't know, latest results or something that's happened in the very recent past. It will then really fan out and conduct an enhanced multi-query search. And what that gives it is basically then a full set of kind of links and sources and so on that it can use to compile a response. The second stage then is really it goes through a process of scoring relevancy, the accessibility of the content. In other words, how clippable and sniffable that content is, whether it's clear what it's saying in terms of your markups in the system that you're publishing the content through. So at the end of that stage, it's really looking to grab content and snippets from the source that it's identified as authoritative. And so in effect, that is refining its set of links and sources to generate the response. And then the final piece is, in effect, allocating an authority to the content. So this will be through things that you're fully familiar with in terms of social engine optimization, social media, and also third-party sites. So LinkedIn and Reddit are always cited as sources that give greater authority to content that you publish. So once it knows that it's an authoritative source, it will then use that and cite it in the response. And that's basically how AI delivers and generates a response for any query that you might ask. And I think there's a couple of background stats here that you can see. Firstly, the impact of AI search. So the stat on the left there is the 1 billion people using AI summaries each month. So probably no surprise how big that is. What might be a surprise is basically that 50% of Google searches are now showing AI summaries. And also the number of people that are not now clicking through to the website. So that does mean, obviously, they're looking at the answer that's given in, say, ChatGPT or Perplexity and taking that as gospel. But it is important still to know that the number of searches are rising. A lot of that is driven by, obviously, AI and LLMs. So, you can see it's very important to be discoverable and visible to those search engines, as well as traditional SEO. Thanks, Claire. Hope that gives a bit of an overview of how it works.
Lovely. Thank you, Richard. So I think it's clear that search has changed a lot in terms of how we're finding information and how we're searching for information. So I'm going to dive into a little bit about what this means for content. I covered some of these points that I'm going to go over in the last webinar that we did, but we're going to dive into a little bit more about why expertise has become so important. So as I mentioned in the introduction, one of the real ironies about AI is that the kinds of content that it helps us generate, that feels a little bit generic. It feels a little bit, I think the word I like here is ultra processed content. So that feels really generic, bland, jargon stuffed. That's not the stuff that performs well in the search. So, there's a real tension there. In terms of the kinds of content that people are increasingly finding easier to produce isn't the kind of content that's getting surfaced by AI search. So in the same way that Google's algorithms evolved in old school SEO, it really evolved from sort of prioritizing keyword stuffed filler content towards favoring trusted expert content that really answered users' questions in the best way, most relevant way. And geo is really the same. So it's going to be favoring that original expertise, first-hand experience, unique perspectives, not listicles like, the 5 cleverest things I heard somebody else say this week. So what's going to win now is really that sort of higher value strategic communications that helps organizations position themselves as thought leaders. And as Richard mentioned, although traffic and clicks might be decreasing, websites still may remain really important. It's just that we might need to change tack a little bit in terms of how to be successful and visible in search today. So as I mentioned, it's that ultra processed content that's become really common that we're trying to avoid here. So what are the things we need to do to stand out in the generative crowd? On the left-hand side, you'll see what I mean by that generic content. It's kind of that rewritten industry advice, really generic best practices that almost anybody could write based on, a little bit of research. AI generated summaries, or that sort of like trend commentary that used to be all the rage, say 5 to 10 years ago. And on the right-hand side is what is going to be much more citable now, and it's original research, client experience, or really specific examples, subject matter expert insight, so insight that only you can create as your organization or as an expert, or really strong analysis of proprietary data. So that's the key point, really. AI systems don't need another source telling them what they already know. When they're deciding to surface information, it's increasingly content that contributes something new, specific, or really credible to a certain topic or a field. So I included a before and after titles there at the bottom, just for a bit of fun. Before, 5 cybersecurity trends in 2025. After, the kinds of content that's going to get found is more likely what 250 security audits revealed about third-party risk. So you can see there that first headline, there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it's something that hundreds of organizations could write. They could create the same article, potentially using LLMs, and come up with something really similar. So the second one, that's much more about we've got access to unique information that's specific, it's based on our direct experience, it's original evidence and insights that only we as an organization can provide with access to those security audits. So which of these two articles are you more likely to trust? Which one are you more likely to read? And which one are you more likely to remember? And crucially for this conversation, which one is AI going to surface when answering a user's question? And it's that second one. So just to refresh on what we think makes content citable and dive into a bit more detail, I'm famous for saying that many organizations think that thought leadership starts with just writing, but it doesn't. It starts with having something really worthwhile to say. In our experience, genuinely distinctive content usually comes from one of 4 places, whether that's proprietary data, a really unique perspective, a clear or expert viewpoint, preferably with evidence, or a fresh angle on something that is really a familiar topic. So notice that all these 4 have something in common. They're really difficult to replicate. So again, it comes back to that point of AI not looking for something that a lot of people have said already. It's looking for new opinions or new perspectives or things like that. So the goal isn't just to publish more content, it's to publish something only you could say as your organization. Now, the difficult thing about this is that all of these points are suggesting even more reliance on internal experts. And that's something that we know can be difficult in terms of getting access to that insight and creating a way to surface that in a really efficient way. We work with a lot of organizations who say we've got the most amazing internal experts here, but we find it really hard to get them to write. Unfortunately, the focus of GEO is going to make their input even more important. So EEAT, it was on one of Richard's slides earlier, and I'll spell it out for those who are not as digitally advanced as Richard is, like me. And that means experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And these are the things that are going to help your content to be surfaced in generative engine optimization. These are also important for SEO. So it's not that this is a new thing, it's actually sort of going back to fundamentals in a sense, in terms of quality content is what's going to get you seen in these new spaces. But one of the things that we're tapping into for Stratton Craig ourselves is that realizing that AI is looking for signs of individual expertise and how you're surfacing that expertise in your content. One of the things we've started doing is really profiling our subject matter experts space, or positioning as leaders, as thought leaders within a certain niche. One of the things we're trying to do is where we've all rewritten our bios, and the content that we've all written around that is becoming a bit of a topic hub, linking off to insights around specific subjects. So I'll show you what that looks like. This handsome chap is Cole. He's our writing and AI lead, and our subject matter for all things AI. He's always across the latest updates in AI and writing insights about those findings and how they relate to the world of content. So this, for example, is a really great opportunity for us to center him as a subject matter expert in AI. His profile acts as a bit of a hub. It can links off to all his recent content pieces. And then it gives people, I guess, that real sense of here's somebody who's got something significant to say about this topic. I say people, I meant AI there because actually this is a signal that we're trying to give to AI to demonstrate his real authority in this space. And it reminds me of something I read once. Sometimes something stays with you for years and years, or this is one that stayed with me. And that's that for an organization selling expertise or services, your insight is part of what you're selling, and your content is one of the most tangible ways for you to capture and demonstrate that expertise and insight. And this has definitely been borne out in terms of how AI is rewarding that expertise. I'm probably talking too much already, but I did mention a bit around that challenge of really finding ways to capture that insight from your subject matter experts. So we know that should be a lot easier for us as a company of writers, but I can tell you that our marketing team says they will find that hard to get time with us as well in terms of our subject matter expertise. But we especially sympathize with those of you who might be working with lawyers, accountants, engineers, or IT professionals, because asking those people to take time out of their day to write a lengthy insight doesn't always go down well. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about ways you can get around this, like how to really fast track that extraction of insights. It sounds almost extractive in a bad way. That's not what I meant. Extractive in a supportive, helpful way. So one of the things that we find really helpful is either tasking your internal marketing team or an external agency to run a quick interview. To really have a conversation with your experts about what's really interesting or relevant about a topic area. You can run that transcript through AI so that it's just can really create a very quick marketing draft, refine that, always have the human in the process, obviously, in terms of aligning that with your organization's objectives, business messages, share that with the SME to do a review, and that the content then can be published. But, with a few crucial stages of intervention there, you've created a much higher quality piece of content than you would have otherwise, and you've created a bit more of an efficient way to get your subject matter experts' insights to market. Skipping forward. So really, just to reiterate, this is about getting those fundamentals right. So technical SEO is still table stakes. You can't not do it, but it won't be enough to compensate for weak, generic, inconsistent, or just low quality content. So we're really seeing AI reward content that explains ideas really clearly, shares unique information, data and insights, includes identifiable expertise. From identifiable experts, provides good context to help it stand alone in those snippable, clippable pieces that Richard was talking about earlier, which is going to be my words of the day, and provides a consistent narrative across channels. So for businesses, that means you should focus less on producing more content and focus more on producing high quality content that earns trust and credibility. At the end of the day, we're not trying to trick AI. We're trying to make your expertise clear, consistent, easy to verify, and visible to people. So this is some simple points we've got around how to make that content, what we define as really useful content. And I think it's a really good way to help break it down to what makes content useful here. And by relevant, we really mean that's personally relevant or meaningful to your audience. To get this right, you really need to know and not guess what's important to them. What pain points are you solving for them? What do they value most about your services? And relate your content to this. Distinctive, well, these are those points we talked about earlier around proprietary research or a unique point of view, something that helps you stand out in amongst the crowd. Engaging, this is about using techniques to really engage emotionally and cognitively with your audience. When people write in stories as one of the ways we do this, but when you write content that really connects with people, they're much more likely to remember it and recall it. When they have an opportunity to come to need your services, you'll be the one. Happily, that also works for AI because stories get cited when they contain specific details, relevant outcomes, evidence base, making expertise tangible. So the same kind of thing that works for humans works to be found in AI. And repeatable. This is that point around building a system that makes the process of extracting the expert insights from your organization and turning them into high quality content in a really repeatable way with some governance around how you do that. So that might be about establishing tone of voice and style guides to make sure your content creators are singing from the same hymn sheet. It might be about establishing a really robust editorial process to industrialize that process of extracting insight from your business. Or it might be about setting some rules of governance around when your content is updated, who owns it, when it's refreshed, when you need to review it. And finally, setting some KPIs. So measuring what good looks like and being really clear about the objectives of your content program and making sure that you can tell whether it's working to do what you hoped it would rather than just being beautiful wallpaper for your website. So all these things can help ensure your content is on brand and on point. But that last point around measuring if you know what works brings me really nicely to Richard, because in order to make sure you're getting it right, it's really important that you can measure what matters. And Richard's going to run us through the AI analyzer to talk a little bit about how you can measure your performance in an AI world.
Great. Thanks, Claire. And yeah, very informative around the content. Naturally, if anyone's got any queries, you might see the message in there, do feel free to drop them in the Q&A and we'll pick them up if we can towards the end. But I guess, yeah, analyzing AI performance is a whole new world because it's very different to, a lot of what we're used to, if you like, in the traditional web world. So I think there are really three lenses that we now need to look through your analytics for digital communications. There's the top right there, which is website analytics and around user behaviors and so on. Largely unchanged. So obviously continue to use the tools that you currently have in place for that. You can, of course, also track the actual individuals or audiences or companies that are looking at your web content. But I guess the new territory there at the top left, which is how do you track and measure performance within your AI world, as it were. And many people aren't familiar with the fact that you can actually get quite a bit of data from your firewalls. So they're basically the technology point at which people will first arrive at your website. And the reason that can give you data is because that's where all the bots and crawls hit first. So what you can see within this slide is just an illustrative report that shows on the left-hand side the top 10 bots that are accessing this particular website and how many requests they have in a month, country and region they're coming from. But you can also tell the URL, obviously we blank that out for anonymity purposes, the URL of content page that content is being accessed from. So this kind of information from your technology team will enable you to see, well, actually, which are the LLMs or AI search channels that are being most used by your audiences, where are they being used from, and also what content are they accessing to deliver responses. So it's really valuable data if you can get access to it. So you can see here just a little bit of an example of a dashboard. So for many of our clients, we integrate these dashboards. So this is data you cannot get from Google Analytics, by the way, this scraping content. So you can see there in the left-hand chart on the top is the information from those technology platforms. So you can see in this particular example, 194,000 crawls of data. And then on the bottom left, you can see the equivalent users. So, this overall dashboard gives you really good insight into the balance between human and AI visitors or readers or scrapers of content. And obviously then you can track how many referrals come across from AI search and so on. So, as I say, valuable information. And on the bottom right there, you can see the different channels of LLMs that are accessing content. From what we see so far, certainly ChatGPT is well ahead of the others, but obviously the likes of Perplexity and TikTok and so on feature heavily too. So that's, if you like, a statistical point of view. The other thing you can do is run what we call an AI performance analyzer. So this is the way we help clients really understand whether they're presenting their content, publishing their content in a way that is visible to LLMs. So we can evaluate your website performance against specific prompts, terms that you want to be known for. Now remember, whereas in good old traditional search, you can go into Google search, you can look at search terms and see where you rank. Well, you can't really do that with AI search because they don't give you that information. What you can do is work through the types of questions or topics that you want to be known for, run those through the LLMs and see how you perform and how well your site is cited in the responses. We can also assess your performance against 3 of your competitors and see how well you stack up and what topics and visibility you have for those. And also you can look at sentiment, which is quite helpful. You know, is it positive, negative, or perhaps neutral in terms of the response tone that gives back. And obviously the other half is the really important way of how well your content in your website is structured. So semantically, what that means is, have you got good, clear headings, subheadings? Have you marked up introductory? Have you marked up quotes? You know, that sort of thing, just to make sure that, if you like, in a traditional website world, search vehicles can understand the structure of the page and what's in it. And also we'll look to see whether your technical aspects are set up. So have you added schema markups, which is a very technical way of basically saying, have you made it clear that, for example, this page has a quote from your CEO on dated at this particular time? So it's information like that that makes all the difference as to whether your content is seen and cited in the results by these different search engines. And what we'll do is present findings and recommendations to improve your visibility across those areas, and give you a good performance dashboard, around how well that content is and recommendations and how you can improve. So it's a really useful tool to be able to assess your current performance and give you a roadmap for improving that. So naturally, do let us know if that is something that would be of interest to you. And of course, you can carry on analysing that over a period of time. And I'm often asked how often this should be done. And to be honest, it probably depends a little bit on the frequency of content that you publish. But certainly, quarterly would be typical as to what our clients look. So again, identifying those ongoing topics and prompts, you run periodic research and find out how well you're improving as a result of the actions you've taken. Just making sure that you continue to be visible in the topics that are important to you in these AI search channels. So Claire, that's a little bit of an overview of how the AI Performance Analyzer works.
Almost forgot to unmute. Marvelous. Thank you so much, Richard. Really helpful, I think, to see that we can start doing some measurement in AI search in the way that I think people missed when it came through. That was all the content we wanted to run through today in terms of how to be found through AI search. I mentioned earlier that Black Sun and Stratton Craig are both members of the Positive Change Group, and I'll just say a little bit about that. Since 2023, we've been a part of that group, and we're a group of like-minded agencies, and we share that view that better communications can build better relationships with stakeholders, and that better relationships build better businesses. So obviously Stratton Craig, we deal with the content side of everything content and language related. Black Sun is focused on stakeholder engagement, so corporate marketing, digital communications, sustainability, ESG reporting, and People Made, our cultures are a specialist brand and culture agency. So in terms of questions today, we do have one question in the chat, but we also have more time for questions if anybody would like to pop their questions in now. In full disclosure, I was supposed to say at the beginning, please pop your questions in Q&A. So thank you, Rich, for jumping in and doing that. And we've got a question from Patty saying, do we know whether AI search favors data-led stories or detailed and engaging storytelling, or a mix of both? And I think in my experience, the answer is a mix of both. And it's that sense of the data-led stories are probably quite easy for AI to make that snippable, clippable content. But actually, the detailed narrative sort of gives that sort of why. So the data might be the what, you're talking about, and it makes it easy for AI to find evidence-based information responses to question. But the narrative and engagement sort of storytelling piece is a bit of the why that might be important. I guess one of the things to be a bit wary of is that really detailed storytelling approaches might contain a lot of nuance and mean that something that is clipped out is taken without the appropriate context around it. So it's something to be a little bit wary of. I think we'd probably advocate a bit of a hybrid approach there. Richard, does that confirm with your point of view as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're right, it is a mix of both, and it probably really depends around the topic, subject matter, because obviously it depends a little bit on the question that the user will ask. So there'll be some that naturally lead more to data points because that will be where most of the queries arrange around, whereas others might be, positional type questions or, more, I guess, more topic theme led. So I definitely think about the topic and area that you're writing about and craft the content that is most likely to serve up useful content to those queries. So yeah, a mix of both is probably the right answer.
I've got a question from Maria. Thanks, Maria. Where do you see the biggest risk today being misrepresented by AI models, not represented at all, or being overshadowed by competitors' narratives? Ooh, I think this is a tough one. It will probably depend on what your objectives are. But I think all of these are going to be a problem for most companies wanting to control what's said about them. If you haven't, I guess, invested in sort of understanding and analyzing how AI is surfacing your content, it may be that it's coming from um, other places. I mean, Richard mentioned Reddit earlier. Nobody's going to want their corporate organization, hijacked by user-generated Reddit content. Um, but I think being not represented at all would be a huge problem for companies, and same as being overshadowed by competitors' narratives. I'm not sure that I can choose one that is the largest risk. Richard, do you have a view on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably they're not being represented at all because if you're not at the table, you don't get a voice at all.
Mm,
I mean, it's going to be very difficult to, if you like, control what AI is saying about you and the responses it's given. All you can do is basically do your best to be an authoritative source. But remember also that LLMs will mix and blend different content from different sites into a single answer. So I would definitely say that's the biggest risk. I think I guess it's important to just really think about the key topics, messages, and so on that you want to be represented in, and make sure that you can build that authority as best you can. So that would be my response to that question.
mm.
There's a great
And
question there from Gareth as well, isn't there? On examples of clippable and snippable content. I
ooh,
love that one. I think it's yeah. I mean, you might have examples, Claire, but I think that it's really I mean, interesting. What we're starting to see is probably a little bit more summaries at the top of the page. So if you're in the corporate website world, you can see some of those in, let's say the Halion website has some good examples of that. But also writing content with subheaders that perhaps have questions with answers and so on. So there are, I guess, probably more news type sites that will deliver content in that frame. So I guess it's a bit horses, of course, but there is a couple of examples that I would use to bear in mind. I think whilst it's important to write content in a way that can be clipped and snipped, shall we say, please remember that it is vital that you do things like schema markups and meta descriptions for the content. Otherwise, how you write content won't have the same effect. So in other words, it's you'll be doing half a job. So it is important to think about both halves, both the content crafting and the markups and tagging in the system that can be read by AI. I don't know if you'd add anything to that, Claire.
no, I think that's really sensible, and I guess it highlights that aspect of you need to have the content right, but then you also need to have the technicals right behind the scenes, which is, a classic example of the Claire Richard double act here. I like to say good cop, bad cop. and he used his teacher voice there in terms of remembering your schema. But it isn't enough to just say the right things. You do need to make sure that you're thinking about the context in which things can be lifted and pulled out. And that's that point around the clippable, snippable is that think about, we all see it in the AI summaries that surface, but Google snippets have been doing this for a long time with SEO as well, and the gold standard was really trying to get into that snippet so you're above all the other search things. But yes, it really is about, a key stat that says you're finding and your opinion on it within the same sentence so that gets pulled in one piece. It's those pull quotes from your execs so that when somebody's looking for a credible opinion on something, it's your exec's, quote that comes up and is attributed accurately. I guess those are the kinds of things I would think of when I think clippable, snippable, which is getting harder to say as I carry on through this webinar. Any other questions? Have we missed any of them?
There's a question here from Debbie, which is, are articles or is content more likely to get cited if it contains numerous references to research, stats and data from various credible sources? Another cracking question.
Yeah, great question. We're doing very well with the questions today. Well done, everyone. I think it is more likely to get cited. And I think that's that sense of those authority and evidence signals. So you're demonstrating to Google trustworthiness. And that comes from evidencing claims. It comes from, prioritizing research if you've done it yourself. But yeah, I think that is one of the ways that you can become more visible in content. Richard, is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, obviously don't do what we used to call SEO stuffing, where, obviously you're just, doing a load of references to other research and so on that's vaguely relevant. I know you don't mean that, but just for avoidance of doubt. I also would advise this will help you, as Claire said, but also think about the other way around. In other words, can you get your content and your authoritative content published on other authoritative channels and repost on your LinkedIn or social media channels? Because then you will get other people referencing your content that will elevate its authority. So I would definitely look at this as a two-way lens. Yes, use references and so on for content that you're publishing, but also look to how you can extend the reach and other people's publication of your content to raise your own authority, if that makes sense.
Yeah, really good point. Oh, the questions keep rolling in. Samantha's got a question. Oh, hi, Sammy. When creating quality and distinguishable content, quality and distinguishable content becomes even more important. How can you get colleagues and stakeholders on board with that and away from the spray and pray approach? Ah, that is tricky. Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I think is important here is about demonstrating the dangers of doing the spray and pray, right? Nobody wants to spend a lot of time creating content that isn't performing. So getting good at measuring what content performs and what doesn't, and then reporting that back to make it clear that people's efforts are going where it's going to make the most impact, I think is one of the ways you can sort of highlight the importance of taking a much more considered approach to that. I think the other danger, and I know you'll know what I'm talking about. I've seen this in some organizations where their insights and thought leadership can get dominated by one particularly loud voice. And it's not that they're doing a spray and pray thing. It might just be that they're a more prolific writer, more comfortable with writing, you know, think of lots of ideas for something to say, but it can end up feeling quite unbalanced across an organization. So again, I think a really good content strategy is important to make sure that you're placing your sort of insight bets, demonstrating a spread of your expertise rather than just one thing that happens to go to the loudest voice. Um, yeah, I think that world of sort of I have something to say, so it must be important to everybody wanting to listen to it is something that's again really important to get away from in content strategy because what you're saying needs to be really important and relevant to your audience. So one of the things that I can see often happens with people who are really immersed in their subject matter expertise is they just want to talk about all the time and say really incredibly detailed things that they find absolutely fascinating. I think it's always a really important discipline to go back to what is my audience most concerned about? What are the questions we're answering for them? And how are we relating our services to the problems we can solve for them? Hopefully that's answered your question, Sammy. Anything to add there, Richard?
No, I think you covered that perfectly.
Excellent.
There's a good question here from Alexander, I think, which is, do you have any thoughts or insights from clients you've worked with within regulated industries? Working in asset management, potential difficulties around compliance allows from a subject matter expert opinion and disclosure of opinion, not fact. And I think it's a good question because obviously there are a lot of sectors that are heavily regulated. And I think, obviously you'll have a perspective on this. I mean, I think there are different ways of attacking this. I think there are companies that attack this by basically, talking about particular topics through case studies or customer stories, or running research and so on. So they're identifying some of their key themes and developing content that allows them to be represented and discovered through AI channels as a result of that. I think the likes of LNG and I know NatWest Group do a lot of work around thinking about some of those topics. Also, you get companies say, I know it's a different industry, so bear with me, but like so Nestle, what they've done is created a whole area on their site around Ask Nestle Anything, and that allows them to put positional information, and points of view in what is a regulated industry, but in another lens, obviously, but allows them to, if you like, either preempt or take a position and get representation through an AI search on topics that matter for them. So hopefully find those a couple of useful examples as to how you potentially approach that challenge.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you, Richard. And Alexandra, do have a perspective on this because before I moved to the wrong side of the world for love, I worked in asset management for 15 years. So I'm quite familiar with the challenge of wanting to say exciting, engaging things to your audience and complying, saying, no, stop making it so exciting. One of the things I tried, and I don't know if this will work in your sphere, is bringing compliance on board in terms of, I guess, that governance process that wasn't just about how do we stop. I guess we made them part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So how can we keep on the right side of you whilst getting insights out to the audience? What are the things we need to avoid? We included that within our governance framework around how content can be produced. What are the things to avoid? What are the things we can go with? And the other thing that I found really worked in a compliance conversation was remembering that what they're often trying to do is make everything as clear as possible, as open as possible, and transparent as possible. And actually, those are kind of things that work well in content as well. So it is evidence-based. It is using clarity of language and avoiding, confusion. So my solution to that was sort of bringing compliance onto the team in terms of making content more clear, useful, and relevant to audiences. And it kind of got around that sense of we were pulling in different directions. But yeah, I acknowledge that it definitely can be a challenge in regulated space. Oh, I've got a question for Debbie. Any tips on encouraging SMEs to be confident in sitting down with us for a 20-minute conversation about their knowledge? Oh, yes. I think the most persuasive reason to sit down with an expert and share insights with them is that this is actually going to save them a lot of time. So, I know that in some organizations, fee earners or partners are also measured in terms of whether they're contributing articles or making a contribution to the marketing of the firm as well. That can be quite a burden if somebody isn't as comfortable a writer. It takes a long time if you're sitting out with the blank page sometime to create something. Dealing with an expert can be a much quicker way to do that. Usually we find, a lot of our writers come from a journalistic background, and within 20 minutes we can have a conversation that has uncovered a lot more, really gold insight that we can use in a range of different angles to create content. So sometimes that one conversation create three to four pieces of content that we explore and bulk out the research behind it to across different angles on the same issue. So really, it's about positioning it as a time saving, positioning it as an efficiency piece, reassuring people that they maintain all of the control over that, because that can sometimes be a bit of a challenge with people not wanting to relinquish control of things that are byline for them. But then also it's about demonstrating credibility and understanding really quickly. That's one of the things we always teach our writers is that if you're dealing with somebody who's very time poor, make it clear straight away that you've done your research, you know why you're there, you can really help them, you understand their topic, and this is going to be of benefit to them. Hopefully that's given you something to go on there, Debbie. Is that all the questions? Did we get to them all?
I
Okay,
think so, yeah.
I think that's all of them. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for your excellent questions. That was definitely a highlight for me.
Mm.
We now, that was all we wanted to run through today, so we'll give you back 15 minutes of your day. Um, we are actually offering, for anybody who's interested, a free content audit of your website against the GEO writing standards. We've got 3 of these audits to give away, so if you are interested in that at all, please get in touch with us afterwards, and the first 3 people to respond will get one of our highly coveted GEO audits. And with that, I will say thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you to Richard for presenting alongside me, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.